just get it all up. Oh, there we go. Right. Oh, now it didn't open like this for me yesterday. Is this going to be big enough for people to actually see? Right. Well, my name's Nicole Freeman, and I work for the portal, but I am the domestic abuse worker for East Sussex Healthcare Trust. So I can work across both the Conquest and the Eastbourne District General sites. I'm kind of based within the safeguarding team at the hospital. Now, before we begin this presentation, I realised that kind of watch at least kind of one film, and I do understand that some of the content may be difficult for people to kind of listen to. So I will hang about afterwards for a while if anybody specifically wants to talk to me about any issues. And the aim and objective of this presentation is so that people understand the dynamics of domestic violence and abuse, and it's specifically to its relevance to health, and also to be confident to ask patients about their experience of domestic abuse and also how to respond to that. And more importantly as well is to know how to use the care pathways to access sources of support for patients who are actually experiencing domestic abuse. So what do we mean when we talk about domestic abuse? You know, kind of what are your thoughts in respect to domestic abuse? I don't know if anybody's got any specific thoughts or anything that they want to share on domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is more, it's kind of what we try and do is to kind of bust those myths around domestic abuse. It's not just about men hitting women in a heterosexual relationship. It can happen to anyone from basically from all walks of life. It's an issue that affects men and women, both in a heterosexual relationship and also within the same-sex relationship. It's not just about partner violence as well. That can include adult children with elderly parents as well. So I'm going to watch what I've just kind of spoken to you about. It's, you know, it's although it's predominantly a gendered crime, it can happen to male victims, and I'm just going to show you a film about which does involve a male victim.
Nicole, we seem to have missed the film. Are we meant to click on the link?
Right. Did it not come up at all on the screen?
It's only the link to the videos, but not the video itself. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Sorry, I've just been sitting there watching it. Go back. Do apologise for that. Let's try again.
It's okay. It's technology.
Can you see it now?
No, it's just a link to the videos. Maybe if we could click on the link and then watch it from there.
Yeah, that's what I've been clicking on. So I can see it on my computer, but I can't.
Yeah. Okay. If the trainees could just click on the link to the video link, please, and then once everyone is finished watching all the links, just raise your hands.
Yeah,
Be
if
good.
we could just go on the male one because I think the others are quite lengthy. So if we just go, if we
On
could
the
just
male victim,
male
yeah.
one, that would be yeah, that would be great.
Okay, we could all do that. Thank you. Shall we continue, Nicole?
Yeah, shall we go on? I'll have to sort that little technical hitch out afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so we move on to the definition of domestic violence and abuse. And this is currently as it stands, although when the new domestic violence bill comes in, we're hoping that this is going to slightly change. And this is the cross-government definition of domestic violence and abuse. And it's classified as any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, threatening behaviour, violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over who are or have been in an intimate partners or family members, and that is regardless of gender or sexuality. Now, that abuse can encompass, but not just limited to, psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, financial and emotional abuse. And also within that kind of umbrella, it also includes honor-based violence, female genital mutilation, and also forced marriage. And we've got some statistics here. These are a little out of date and will kind of need updating. But the crime survey for England and Wales, ending in March 2018, showed that there was 2 million adults aged between 16 and 59 had experienced domestic abuse in that last year. 1.3 of those victims were women, as opposed to 695,000 men. The police recorded 549 domestic abuse crimes, which was an increase of 23% from the previous year. And also the police made 225,714 arrests. However, this is only the tip of the iceberg, because domestic abuse is often hidden and people don't always report to police. So, you know, that's only a partial picture of what is actually happening out there. Some more facts and figures here. So 1 in 4 women are affected by domestic abuse in their lifetime. And those figures now are kind of, there's more of a inclination going towards the fact that that's probably down to 1 in 3 now. Every day, almost 30 women will attempt suicide as a result of experiencing domestic abuse, and every week 3 women will take their own life. 1 in 6 men are affected by domestic abuse in their lifetime, and that's kind of thought to be more now, kind of 1 in 5. Women are much more likely to be high-risk victims of domestic abuse, and 95% of all cases going to MARAC are women, and 7 women a month are still killed by their current or former partner in England. So those statistics are quite high, and I've kind of pulled some local ones out as well. And this is just referring to Sussex Police. Now, just before lockdown in February last year, the police received 2,000 calls a month, which were domestic related, which then rose to the end of that first lockdown period to 2,750. So, you know, that was a really significant increase. When we came out of lockdown, initially those figures were high, but they've kind of been leveling off again. So it's still 2,000 calls a month that police are receiving just in the Sussex area. And then between October, for just a quick snapshot period, between October 2020 and December 2020, the portal services, the domestic abuse services in East Sussex, received 753 high-risk referrals, which was kind of a steady increase from what happened from that same kind of period last year. High-risk cases get sent to what we call MARAC, which is a multi-agency risk assessment conference. It takes place on a Tuesday over in Hastings and covers the Hastings and Rother area, and on a Thursday weekly over in Eastbourne, Lewis and Wealdon area. In a year's period from April 2019 to March 2020, there were 1,051 high-risk cases discussed at the Sussex MARACs, and that was an increase of 18% from the previous year. But more importantly, it's not just the victims themselves. Within those families that were discussed at MARAC, there were 1,700 children involved within those cases. Now, with the exception of coercive and controlling behaviour, which was introduced as a criminal offence in December 2015, other acts of domestic abuse fall under generic legislation. So the offences will be can be a combination of offences of coercive control and the common assault and battery, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, criminal or malicious damage, rape, and threats to kill. And Jordan Worth, who was the perpetrator in the video that you've just watched, was the first female in the UK to be convicted of coercive controlling behaviour. And I'm not sure whether the film mentioned it, but she received a custodial sentence of 7.5 years for the abuse suffered by her partner. As I said, coercive controlling behaviour can be a standalone offence, but part of that domestic abuse can also be that will involve some form of coercive controlling behaviour. And why it's so important that we understand that is because research says that domestic homicide is actually predictable. Coercive control predicts homicide more effectively than violence by 9 times. And at least 10 people will die every week in the UK as a result of abuse and neglect. And emerging findings from UK domestic homicide reviews support and reflect international findings. And domestic homicide reviews kind of really does what it says on the packet. Every time somebody dies and there is suspected domestic abuse, the local authority are held responsible for for reviewing this. So it's where a lot of agencies get together and to see what, if anything, has been put in place to protect those victims, what could have been done, and kind of also will inform policy and practices, because you know what needs to be done to try and stop these deaths happening in the first place. And most domestic homicide reviews do not often reach that kind of high risk threshold where there is a lot of agency involvement with it. It was the course of conduct legislation, so kind of the stalking and how that interacts with coercive control, and that's kind of is really important. And research shows that people who are controlling are not just anyone. They are quite identifiable in many cases. We won't have time to do that one, but what has kind of come about from the domestic homicide reviews is the link to domestic abuse and health. We find a lot of victims and also perpetrators can also present with suicidal tendencies and self-harm as a way for suicidal tendencies as a way of getting out of the abuse that they are suffering, and also kind of self-harming as a way of coping with what they are going through. And that also applies to alcohol and substance misuse. A lot of victims suffer with depression, anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. They can also experience chronic intergestional problems. And also, unfortunately, pregnancy is a really high risk time for domestic abuse. It can, for lots of different reasons, it can be the onset of domestic abuse. And it can also, if you are already in an abusive relationship, it will increase your risk during pregnancy. And it also it can increase the levels of violence directed towards you as well. And obviously, it's not just when you're pregnant, it's not just, you know, the risk to yourself, it is also the risk to your unborn child. So it can also result in a premature birth and stillbirth. There's a lot of bladder and kidney infections kind of linked to this as well. And with sexual abuse, you know, vaginal bleeding, sexually transmitted infections, and chronic unexplained pain, traumatic injuries, problems with the central nervous system, you know, repeated health consultations as well, where people just continually present with symptoms. And also, one other issue to be aware of is, you know, when there's other people who will not, a partner who has to be present during all consultations as well. These are kind of all health warning signs that, you know, to look out for. So kind of examples of coercive controlling behaviour. One of the things that is very common in domestic abuse is when perpetrators will isolate people from their family and friends. And that can result, as within that you saw in the video, of depriving people of their basic needs, such as food. monitoring their time. What are they doing? They want to know what their partners are doing every minute of the day. Monitoring your online communications, and that can also include fitting spyware to your computers, trackers on your car. So they come to a point where they want to take control over every aspect of your life. So that's where you go, who you can see, what you can wear, when you can sleep and eat. And also depriving people access to support services such as medical services. Repeatedly putting someone down, such as saying things, like you're worthless, kind of derogatory name calling, which kind of leads on to kind of, humiliating, degrading, or, generally dehumanizing a person. It can also take control of your finances and making threats or intimidating you. And they can become very fearful. So a lot of clients that we speak to, they will say that it's living with their partner is like walking on eggshells all the time. And some people have said it's like living with a Jekyll and Hyde character. One minute they can be absolutely lovely, and the next minute, the total opposite. And then people start to change their behaviour, like avoiding the consequences of upsetting their partners in the first place. And then what's commonly known is a lot of perpetrators will make threats about their safety. And then you get into that situation where you're into that coerced compliance. You don't make any decisions about your life. All of that is taken out of your hands and put into they're put into someone else's hands. They have complete control over their lives. And then that makes it incredibly difficult to leave a situation. We know from a fact that it usually takes a victim up to 2.5 years on average before they will actually take the first steps and seek any help. And there's also threats made by perpetrators when there are children involved. If you leave me, I will get the children taken away from you. Social services will be involved. That lots of those threats are made to kind of keep someone in their place, really. I'll get this shared with you, this presentation shared with you afterwards, so you can actually go. It'll probably be easier if you can go on these links afterwards, because they do work, but for some reason they're just not working for me today. And then you'll be, if you want to, you can go on there and actually follow the links yourself. What we usually do when we work with victims is we look at what they call the power and control wheel, which was kind of based on the Duluth model, which came out of America some time ago. Because a lot of victims don't actually realise that they're being controlled. They can understand, kind of the physical elements of the relationship, but a lot of people say, well, that's just the way they are. It's all part of that relationship, and they've been in it for such a long time that whole kind of lifestyle has become normalized for them. So we all, this is a really useful tool to kind of start a conversation with people to realize actually that what they are experiencing is coercive and controlling behaviour. So it looks at things like using coercion and threats, using intimidation, emotional abuse. If you can imagine what it must be like living with someone on a day-to-day basis that is continually putting you down, it really eats away at your self-worth and self-esteem, and then it makes you. And also, if you're being stopped from seeing friends and family, you will internalize that, and it makes it incredibly difficult then to get to a point where you feel that you are able to leave that relationship. As I've mentioned before, it's that using isolation, cutting you off from all sorts of human contact. And then we've got the minimizing and denying and blaming. A lot of victims will blame themselves for their abuser's behaviour. I've mentioned before the threat of using children, and even when people leave a relationship, they separate and they will leave a relationship, that abuse can still continue through child contact. And then we've got using male privilege, where people feel coerced into performing maybe sexual acts that they don't want to, and that can, go from like performing sexual acts to actually to rape. And also using economic abuse, getting victims' wages paid into their bank accounts so that they have total control over all of the money coming into that house. And we also find a lot of victims have also been, their abusers have persuaded them or coerced them into taking out loans and stuff in their name so that they won't have to ever pay that back. So if you have concerns, always try and find out more from the patient or the client. But really importantly, make sure they are on their own without children or their partners or any other family members present. And a lot of people feel that they don't want to pry too much into what's going on into people's backgrounds, into their relationships. But it's really important, and especially within a healthcare setting, because a lot of the time people can, they will come to if they come to appointments on their own, it's a really good time to get people on their own, speaking about, kind of what's going on for them at home. So, simple questions like, are you happy? How are things in your relationship? That's an okay question to ask anyone. How are things at home? Is anyone hurting you? You don't have to refer to a partner. It could be anyone else. And also, do you or your children feel scared or upset? I mean, when I take you back to Marek, or take you back to the statistics around Marek, I mean, that is only the tip of the iceberg. Domestic abuse, if a family have got children, they will be impacted upon by that domestic abuse, either directly or indirectly. I mean, we find a lot of children will be used as kind of shields so that, partners don't hit them. Perpetrators will often take children away and use them as a weapon. And as children get older, they can stand in to, get in the way to try to separate the adults. So, and there's a big chance there that they will get seriously hurt. And it's consider further exploration as well. If people turn up with a lot of bruises and scratches, how did that happen? Asking those really direct questions of, did someone do these to you? We all argue at home. What happens if you or your partner argue or disagree? Do you ever feel afraid of your partner? And has your partner ever destroyed things you cared about? Because that is, kind of another form of abuse. Have they ever threatened you? Have they ever made threats to threatened or abused the children? And we've got here, does your partner ever stop you doing things that you want to do? Have you ever been forced to have sex when you didn't want to, or made to perform a sexual act that you feel really uncomfortable with? Does your partner ever get jealous of you seeing your friends or other people? If so, how does he treat you? And also, there is what we use and what any professional can use is what they call a DASH risk assessment. And what it does, it's a series of 24 or 25 questions, I can't remember which. And what that looks at is it's a series of lots of questions which looks to tease out information from somebody to try and establish what their current risk is. And if you do suspect domestic abuse, or someone has come to you and said, yes, I am in an abusive relationship, discuss that with the ESH safeguarding team. They are kind of your first port of contact. If a member of staff has got a patient and they put it through to the safeguarding team, that referral usually comes to me. However, I do not work 24/7, and you can also refer to CGL at the portal, and that referral is via the link on the safeguarding adult page of the intranet. There is also the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, and that is 24/7. And that is for not just for victims, but that is also for professionals who want some advice as well. Now that is for women only, and for men there is the Respect Helpline, and those numbers are there. But all this information is available on the intranet under the safeguarding page. If you want to know how to complete a DASH, that the link is there, and that is available on YouTube. And there is also available on this link is the Cry for Health report, which was conducted by Safe Lives and Women's Aid about the roles and responsibilities that health authorities have towards victims of domestic abuse. So kind of in summary, we have domestic abuse is essentially, it's a pattern of behaviour. It's not just a one-off incident, or if it is a significant one-off incident, we could look to get involved because it could potentially escalate. And the key difference between it and other forms of abuse are The survivor and perpetrator are known to each other. So, as we said, it could be an intimate partner or an ex-intimate partner or a family member. Unlike stranger abuse or violence, domestic abuse takes place largely in private and behind closed doors. There is often a lack of objective evidence that abuse is taking place. Especially around coercive control, although there has been prosecutions for coercive control in the standalone perspective, it's incredibly difficult to meet the threshold for the CPS prosecutions for it as a standalone offence. Outsiders may take the view that domestic abuse is less serious than other crimes, but actually it's not. It's you know, the victims experience ABH, GBH, rape is considered, you know, comes under that threshold as well. So these are all serious crimes in themselves. The abuse rarely happens once and tends to increase in frequency and severity over time, which is true of many, many victims. The abuser may have a great deal of intimate knowledge about their victims and hurt them in subtle ways that may not be understood by others. You know, there are certain groups that are incredibly vulnerable to domestic abuse, and they are people with poor mental health, people from certain cultural backgrounds and ethnic minorities. Older people can be just as likely to be victims of domestic abuse, and we do find with older victims they have normally been in relationships for years and years, and that abuse has steadily increased over the years. People with substance and alcohol misuse can also be very kind of more susceptible to domestic abuse. Physical injuries as well can also be targeted on places of the body where they are unlikely to be seen. So it's, you know, if people have been, if perpetrators have used strangulation, that unless someone wears a big high neck rolled jumper, it would be quite easy to see those. Marks on the hands could be easily seen, and the arms. So what a lot of abusers will do is target people like around the kind of stomach area, tops of legs, around the genitals. So places where people would usually keep them covered up. And also, it is less likely to be reported to the police, which kind of makes it the true figures on domestic abuse are really unknown, because say a lot of it just goes on behind closed doors and in private. Has anybody got any questions that they would like to ask? I can't see anyone's hand up or anyone writing anything, so I take that is a no. I say I will get this sent out to you all, so you can actually click on those links for any further information. If anyone wants to speak to me, my details are, you can get my contact details from the safeguarding team. They have my phone number and email details. And, you know, just what I would say to all of you was, you know, kind of bear in mind when you're kind of with patients, you know, and just be confident about asking those questions of how things are up at home for somebody. Because as I say, domestic abuse is generally, you know, a hidden crime. Okay, well, thank you for sitting through this presentation today. And I say I will hang about for a while in case anybody wants to talk to me in private. And yeah, thank you all for your time today.